We have all these stories as we're growing up that make us into who we are. So when we have these stories, we're in this space where we have a hard time shifting out of it unless we create awareness. So what I encourage people to do, sit down with a pen and paper, and even if you don't know the feeling or the label of the feeling, is just to write where in your body, like, do you feel heavy? Do you feel tense? Do you feel like where in your, if you could identify a part of your brain that feels, or side of your head even, that feels busy. Sometimes we can just start with our body, because the cool thing is, even if we're not aware, our body is doing and responding to everything at all times.
Get around those obstacles and make room to create opportunities. You are listening to the Around the Way podcast. And now, your hosts, Kyle King and Kiana Williams.
Welcome to another episode of Around the Way podcast, where we help you get around your obstacles and find a way to redesign your life. We are here again on another episode, and it is an amazing day. How are you guys feeling?
So good. So excited.
Awesome.
I feel good. I feel really, really good. It's a nice day.
No, it's beautiful outside. So, as anybody listening, I have a question for you. Have you ever noticed or understood the difference between self-care and soul care? Because self-care is one of those things that gets tossed around all the time, but do you actually know what it means to be able to heal and care for your soul? We have somebody today that's going to be able to walk us through the steps and help you understand how to rock your soul. Nichole Eaton, how are you really feeling today? What is the real feeling that you're identifying with?
I'm just excited. I love sharing this information. This is a deep passion for me, to help people connect with their soul, help people feel empowered, and create a life that they're so excited about.
What does the soul mean to you? Define that.
The soul is the version of us outside of our physical body, right? But it includes the mind. It includes how we think. And I think that we connect with our soul through our thoughts. So I prioritize a lot through how we think about things and mindset when it comes to caring for our soul. Our soul is also the piece of us that is different than what society has told us to be, or what our families or friends or societies have expected of us. And it's our truth at the end of the day. So when we can tap into our soul, we're actually tapping into the truth of who we really are. And that's what leads, in my opinion, to happiness.
That is, it's such an interesting perspective. I've been alive, I guess, long enough to even understand a lot of different things. And I find myself to be a little bit intellectual. But it's interesting because I've never heard this perspective before, like literally. So I've heard self-care, we've heard self-awareness, we've heard mental health, we've heard all of these other terms and terminologies that they've used. But I guess walk me through the process that got you to understanding and being more in tune with your soul.
It's a long story. Are you ready for it? Strap in. So I am a licensed mental health counselor by trade, right? I started as a one-on-one not-for-profit counselor. And in these sessions, I was realizing that people were either healing or not healing, right? There was either this trajectory of people instantly kind of moving forward or just staying stuck for long periods of time. And I realized that there was a difference between the two of these, right? And one was this connection to yourself. So there's people who look externally and let the external situations dictate who they are, how they act, how they feel. And then there's the people who come within, and they check in with who they are, and they check in with how they are, and they create goals internally and build outwardly. And I think that's the huge difference of what happens versus staying stuck, of how do we move forward. So when I'm in this session, in these sessions, I started intuitively resonating energetically with these people, right? I was feeling what they were feeling. I was picking up on things about them that they weren't necessarily saying. And we do that when we're close to people. I hope everybody really has a chance to sit and be totally fully present with somebody else, right?
Talk to us about that, though. Because I think a lot of times we hear present and we say, like, I'm here, but you're really absent in energy, you're absent in mind, you're absent sometimes in spirit. Sometimes you're just absent altogether. Talk to me about, how do you actually be present? Nichole, we have things going on. I have kids. We have this, we have that. How am I really 100% present?
put your phone away. Step one, put your phone in a different area. If you want to get present with somebody, don't even bring it. Like the phone is almost like this energetic pulling of all of your attention, all of your focus. I would say wake up without it. If you have an old traditional alarm clock, don't underestimate the power of just being in your own energy before you dive into other people's energy.
Ooh, hold on.
That's a good one.
Don't just walk over that one, Nichole. Talk to me about that. I love that. Being in your own energy before you're in somebody else's energy.
So a lot of people pick up the energy of other people, right? So the minute we look at our phones, we are having our attention pulled in every direction. We are, even on social media, when you're scrolling through, if somebody's having a hard time and they're writing about it or posting pictures about it, your heart starts to feel that. Your heart starts to go to them. So if you wake up and you're immediately diving into other people's energy or sensations or moods or just whatever is being thrown at you that you suddenly feel impassioned about, it's now taken over your focus.
That's good.
I feel like that's such a good point, because have you ever been asleep and then somebody calls you and they wake you up with foolishness?
Yes.
Or not even calls you. You wake up and you check your text
And there's like
it's
a
something
long
negative,
text
and it's just
message.
like, and you can't even really go back to sleep. And you were getting good sleep.
Or there's like an email from an angry person something.
I've had plenty of those. Like literally, it throws you all the way off.
Like I didn't even have a chance to set my
energy.
Yeah.
I love that.
So when you wake up in the morning, if you can wake up with an old traditional alarm clock and I would encourage people to sleep with their phone in a different room, because honestly, the addiction and temptation is just too real. So if we can separate and create separation, I have a special drawer I put mine in that when I'm working out, when I'm doing like a morning routine, that it's just separate from me. But when you wake up, you have the opportunity to decide how your day is going to go and decide how your energy is going to be throughout the day. And when you have that constant pull, you don't get the opportunity to decide. And that's the most important part about all of this, right?
Exactly.
Is taking those moments and setting yourself up for those moments to make better decisions about who you're going to be.
We often talk about how important starting the day is, right? Yeah. Winning the day before the day really even starts, right? Walk me through your process, or walk me through the process that you would recommend somebody listening to this on how to really start their day.
It's so different for everybody, and I can tell you what I do, but my day is a lot different than a lot of people's day. I have 2 children. My day starts with them.
Exactly.
And so I take them to school, I get them ready. I spend my morning being intentional about them. And then I also have the opportunity and flexibility in my life that a lot of people don't, to start my day. So I start with black coffee and then I go right into my workout. Working out for me is number one for clearing out my energy to focus on my day. I separate that. I clear my energy. I get my, serotonin up, all the good stuff that working out. And then I dive into a really cool practice. And this is, I give this practice credit for changing everything in my life, right? I sit down and I write a thank you note to the universe. So I write this thank you note, and you don't have to, if you don't believe in the universe, you don't believe in God, you don't believe in anything, that's totally fine. You can write it to your highest self. So you write this letter as a thank you of all the things that you're ready to receive as though they've already occurred. So I don't just write for, some people are like, I want to write for $1 million. I don't write for that stuff. I write for how I want to feel. I write for my own empowerment. I write for confidence. I write for being well-spoken on a podcast today. I write for all of these things that I feel like would help my day go smoother.
That's good.
I write for all of the things. I write for connection and presence with my kids. I always write for being present. So just different things that I might notice might make my day easier. I write as though they are already a part of who I am and that I'm just grateful they're there.
That is amazing.
That
I
really
love
is.
that. Nichole, I love that. I want to just, for any parent that's listening, you said one word that I kind of want to just go back to be able to move forward. You said intentional. You're intentional when you're dropping off your kids, before you drop off your kids to school in the morning.
Yeah.
What does that really mean? And talk to that parent on how to be more intentional when it comes to their children.
They have my focus. They have my focus. One of the things that I learned doing traditional therapy training is that kids really just need your attention, and they need your undivided attention. There would be times where I'd be working with kids and people would be like, what have you been doing with them? And I never felt like I was good at working with kids. I'll be clear about that. I never felt like that was something I was strong at, but there was always change, because I feel like when kids feel 100% heard, and even if you just repeat things back to them, oh, you have a science test today. What are your thoughts on that? And not deciding what it has to be, but just cultivating their expression of themselves, their expression of how they want their days to go. And just being present with that, because in the mornings, it's so hard. And again, I have a flexible schedule. So I know that there are times where I used to go to work and I had to be to work at a certain time and I had to work for somebody else. And it was a little bit of a different story. And you might need to find your own flexibility with that setup. But I have the ability to sit with my kids in the morning. You know, my daughter likes to get up early so we can cuddle for a good 5 minutes before we leave. Aww. But they have my energy and my attention, which is something I'm not always able to give them working from home when they get home from school or other times of the day. So finding a time in your day where you can just be present, be intentional, literally just repeating back what they're saying. Ask them open-ended questions. Don't decide what it has to be. So you feel good about that? Don't say that. We're going to say, how are you? How are you feeling about that? What are your thoughts around that?
Now talk to me about the person that doesn't understand their emotion. That person that, you know, how are you feeling? I'm good. Or, you know, I'm all right. I'm doing all right. But all right and good really aren't necessarily feelings, right?
Yeah.
Walk me through how to better identify what emotion, like you talked about cultivating a child's expression and emotion. How do you better cultivate emotions or expressions even as adults?
That's a really tricky question because everybody has a whole different experience of their emotions, and everybody has all different stories about what emotions mean based on how they grew up. So some people are like, you know, they had parents who didn't want them to cry when they got upset. Don't cry, don't cry, you know, and so now they have that feeling of guilt if they connect with a feeling of sadness to cry because that was deemed as bad. We have all these stories as we're growing up that make us into who we are. So when we have these stories, we're in this space where we have a hard time shifting out of it unless we create awareness. So what I encourage people to do, sit down with a pen and paper, and even if you don't know the feeling or the label of the feeling, is just to write where in your body, like, do you feel heavy? Do you feel tense? Do you feel like where in your, you know, if you could identify a part of your brain that feels, or side of your head even that feels busy. Sometimes we can just start with our body, because the cool thing is even if we're not aware, our body is doing and responding to everything at all times.
Exactly.
That's why when we're stressed out, we could still go through it, but our shoulders are going to tense up, our jaw is going to clench, our stomach's going to tighten. So even if we're avoiding it, we can kind of get away with just tapping into our body, but we can also just sit and write. Some people just have a fear of being honest with themselves because society tells us not to. We're supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to be whatever society expects of us. So when we get a moment where we're just allowed and give ourselves permission to feel those emotions by sitting down and just writing, I feel, and just see what words come up.
What comes out.
It might just be a story about your day. It might just be a dumping of your day, but just see what's in there and give it permission to come out. Because sometimes we just need to give ourselves permission to access what we've shut down or felt guilty about or felt bad about or was made to feel shamed about.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I have just a follow-up question to this.
Yeah.
So, because I'm really big in actionable steps, right? Our audience is listening. They understand now the importance of emotion and expression, how to cultivate it, how to identify the emotion using your exercises. Once they've sat down and they've went through all these feelings and they've identified all these emotions and they understand where the story comes from, what do they do with the emotion?
I think that healing is totally different for everybody. And so I would encourage you, a lot of people be like, this is the way, and you should meditate, and you should work out. There's no right thing. You have to see what you gravitate towards that feels like, that feels a little bit better. And you can kind of sit with that of giving yourself options of, okay, how do I feel when I exercise? How do I feel when I eat clean? How do I feel when I get enough water? And you would be surprised. There's this little triangle chart called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You guys know that one?
Definitely.
So 100% true that you cannot access those physiological or you cannot access those emotional states without addressing the physiological first. So sometimes we can actually, just by getting enough sleep, just by getting outside, just by working out, move all of the physiological stuff around so that we can be more present with our emotions and access those easier. So it really depends on the person, on what they feel drawn to. Some people love art. Some people love running. Some people meditate while they run. Some people need that busy meditation, and just have anything that draws you into the present moment is a variation of meditation. Where you lose time, where you lose space, where you forget like that there's a clock on the wall, that's a variation of meditation. That is exactly what your brain needs to settle into the right frequency to heal.
That's good. So anybody listening right now, just to recap, we want you to first cultivate your expression and your emotion. Once you're cultivating that, once you're being more intentional about it, we need you to identify what you feel. Identify the stories, identify the feelings, the emotions that are coming from that story. What's happening in your body when you're feeling stress, when you're feeling triggered, when you're feeling maybe sadness or depression or anger, whatever it is that you're feeling. Then we want you to sit with that emotion. We want you to take time to actually redesign what you want to feel moving forward, and then find an outlet. That's the next step, whether it's art, whether it's journaling, whether it's meditating, whatever works for you, whether it's working out, whatever works for you.
Welcome back. Welcome back. We are still here discussing soul care, soul healing with Nichole Eaton. Why you look like that?
No.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just bring us back.
Welcome back. Welcome back. We are still here discussing soul care and healing and meditative practice and awareness and all those good things with Nichole Eaton. I think you had something you wanted to say going into commercial break. What are you thinking?
Yes. Okay. So emotions are really important, but not actually as important as your thoughts. So we can actually look at it like a flow chart, right? As your thoughts lead to your emotions, and your emotions lead to action or inaction. So if we can actually look at what was I thinking that was making me feel this way, because every thought has an emotion attached to it. So if you say, I feel really good today, it makes you feel good. Mm-hmm. Your body responds in a way that feels good. If you say, I feel really like crap today, and you keep saying that, your body will actually start to create its own illness, right? It'll start to, our posture shrinks, our muscles tense, and it's responding to everything. So we can address the emotion, but sometimes we have to go backwards into what thought led us there to see what it is, to see what we're telling ourselves.
In your life, because oftentimes the goal of this podcast is to be able to pull the curtain behind the actual person, right? Yeah. So the first, part of this conversation, you were amazing and provided strategies and methodologies and techniques for people to kind of transition from where they are emotionally or through their expression to where they would probably even desire to be in regards to being with their soul, right? But when was the last time that maybe you felt something, or maybe you experienced an emotion that you didn't know or that you didn't identify with? Walk me through that story that you found that emotion coming from and what you did through your process to be able to get through it.
So I'm going to take you back a little ways, just because it's a bigger part of my story. I had my first daughter when I was 20 years old. In New York State, that's considered a teen mom, right? So I had really bad postpartum depression after I had my daughter. And it lasted for a while, because even after your hormones shift and everything changes, you can still kind of end up with this lingering depression that's no longer postpartum, but it's still there. And so I was in this state where I just felt like I couldn't get out of. I felt like no matter, I was a therapist. I was going to work. I was putting on the smiley face. I was telling people the right things to do. Sometimes you have to get really honest with yourself. And there were things that were happening. There were things that I needed that I was afraid to say. There were societal expectations of what it meant to be a mom and how sacrificial that needed to be. And so part of my journey in getting out of this deep depression I was in really came down to sitting down with myself and just getting so honest, because I think a lot of depression is actually suppression. When we're not allowed to speak our truth or speak our mind or say, here's what I actually need. What I needed was a break, to be honest. I just needed time alone. I had people around me 24/7. I was going to work, coming home, doing bath, bed, meals, and going and doing it all over again. And it just wasn't the right fit for me. And so I really needed to sit down with literally a pen and paper. And I encourage my clients to do this now, because this was a lifesaver for me, and just say, how am I feeling about the experience in each category of my life? So I would go through, okay, how do I feel about my health? How do I feel about my vitality? How do I feel about my relationship with my kids and my relationship with my spouse? And I would just have really moments of brutal honesty of, this is how I'm feeling. And then I would go into the space of, how would I rather feel? What do I need to believe to get into a space where I feel a little better? What needs to occur, or what conversations do I need to have? I think a lot of becoming and coming out of these darker emotions is getting truthful. And I think there's a lot of fear around being honest about, there's people I work with that are CEOs of major companies who would rather start an art studio, and so imagine being, or somebody who's a doctorate who wanted to get into, life coaching. And so there's so much pressure from everybody around us of who we are and who we need to be, that sometimes we just have to come within and ask those harder questions of, okay, this is my life. What is it that I want, and what do I need to believe? I'm just such a strong believer that the mind is so powerful. And as we're talking about the soul, the mind is absolutely a part of it. So if we think about every thought as like a Google search bar, right? If every thought is an input into your brain asking you to look internally and externally for evidence of that, because our brain's only goal is to be correct. It needs to be right. If it's not right, it considers it an outlier. That's why some people can't take compliments if they don't believe things to be true about themselves, because we're like, oh, that's just, they're just being nice, right?
Exactly.
So our brain is a Google search bar. So if we start inputting in things, our brain's only job is to look for it in our memories, in our experiences, and in our external world. Which is why if you're walking down the street and you believe people just don't like you, you're going to notice only the people who are looking down, looking away, let the door slam in your face when you were trying to walk in. If you believe that people just love you and gravitate towards you, you'll notice the people smiling, the people who are waving or honking as they're driving by. You'll notice the people who held the door open.
No, literally.
We have a filter, and every thought we have creates a new neural pathway. It creates a neural filter for what we see and experience. So we can actually manipulate the whole system by deciding how we would like to be treated, how we would like to show up in the world, how we like people to perceive us, how we want to feel throughout the day. And again, every message, and that's why that practice I was telling you about is so important for me, is because it tells my brain what to look for throughout my day.
So let me ask you this. So when in thinking about the circumstance that you were describing after your daughter was born and all of that, and you going through and thinking how you felt towards different, parts of your life, how much of what you were feeling was your environment or your circumstance, and then how much of it was internal? So like thoughts or beliefs, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was a good 25 external, 75% me, right? So what I mean by that is I was still in school when I had my first daughter. We were paying for daycare, and if you've ever paid for daycare, it was like...
It's like tuition.
It was. I mean,
like a mortgage.
It was like $16,000 a year for 2 kids, and we were making $30,000 a year. I mean, we were about to go bankrupt. I mean, there was all of this financial. It was like, what utilities can we keep on this month? I mean, it was a very stressful time in my life. And it got to a point where it started to create that internal, like, nothing you do. Like, you have a master's degree, you're barely keeping the lights on. Like, it created this internal story that nothing I did was going to be enough, ever. And when you get to that hopelessness of feeling like your circumstances can't change, I think that's when depression occurs. That's when anxiety occurs, is when you feel powerless. And so part of my work now is how do I empower people to remind them that no circumstance is permanent. Well, unless you're dead. I mean.
So are you able to go back to, because I'm assuming that thought of like nothing is good enough had occurred before that at some point, and then the situation you were in reminded you of that, and it was kind of like, here we go again, I'm trying again, nothing is good enough now too. Can you point to a time before that maybe where that was also a feeling?
I think that we absolutely have themes in our life that show up time and time again, and our job is to love on those things that show up and then find a new reality and find a new truth. Somebody once told me that your current circumstance is just a reflection of who you used to be. And so you can create a new future by changing your current day. Whatever today holds, you can design a new future for. But yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I had a series of deaths in my family, very young deaths. So it was like my cousin passed away, he was 17. My aunt passed away, she was 32. My friend's dad passed away, he was 32. So it was like all of these young deaths that happened. And my sister ended up not handling that well. She ended up with a severe mental health disorder and was hospitalized in Philadelphia, 5 hours away. And so I remember being in this situation that just everything around me felt chaotic, and my role, and everybody kind of has a role in their childhood, right? Of like, so my role was like, I'll make everybody happy. Like, I'll just be, you know, this light, I'll do everything right. And I'll, you know, and the reality is that those stories come up for a reason. They come up for your roles. They come up for who you had to be in your family, who you had to be to your parents. And so this definitely wasn't the first time this came up, but I've always been very headstrong when it comes to deciding who I want to be and deciding what I'm going to do. And as long as I can get into that space, I can overcome that. So I was like, okay, this is going on in my family. You know what? I want to be a helper. I want to be a healer. I admire all those people who sat around my sister and supported her during the times where she was in need. I'm going to do that for a living. So I ended up on the therapy track from experiencing all these group family therapy sessions we had to do and just admiring how that shaped my family and how that came out in my family. But with things like self-doubt or with things like those reoccurring themes and stories that everybody has, it's just important that you ask yourself and understand, you know, okay, has that come up for me before? Where did that come from? And what do I know shifts me out of that into a better version of myself? Because the reality is that just because we think something doesn't make it true.
Right.
Even if we think it every day, it doesn't make it truth. Our truth is defined by deciding who we'd rather be. And I think that's the really interesting part about those stories and having experiences like that is because when we get into a space where we start to believe it to be true, we have to understand that if we start thinking a new thought over and over again, that becomes a belief. So we can actually start shifting our mentality and our emotions and our whole belief system just by deciding new thoughts and exercising them like you would at the gym. Doing reps every day, coming back to it every day, revisiting every morning in the same ways I do. I'm telling you, when I took my life from being super depressed and on the verge of bankrupt to being really successful author, being really happy, content, and deeply fulfilled in my life and in a very overflow financial situation, I swear to you, I owe it to that process of just deciding who I wanted to be instead of deciding that the stories of my past or my past experiences had to mean anything about who I could become.
That's good.
So is there anything that you're deciding to be, that you want to be with your future self in mind, that is in any way different than what your brain is telling you that you are? So for me personally, I think I'm always going to be evolving. I think everybody's always evolving. I think there's always days where those stories still creep up of insecurities of like, who am I to come on this podcast? Who am I to, you know, I heard Colleen's podcast interview from your last episode, and it was just, I was like, she's so well spoken. Don't put me after her. But I also have watched who I used to be into who I am now, and I wouldn't be able to recognize that person anymore. And so when we kind of shift forward into knowing that even though we can't see the full picture of who we can become, we can see bits and pieces. And that's the really important part when we're changing thoughts. We can't go from 0 to 60. A lot of people are like, oh, I want to go from being, you know, super insecure to being wildly confident. So I'm just going to say, I'm confident. Your brain is going to literally kick that out the back door. Yeah.
Exactly.
But if you can find out, I'm feeling a little bit better about myself every day, that I can believe in, that I can connect with. And when we start to connect with those smaller thoughts, we can build on them. And then we can
I agree with that. I think the hard part is people around you will be like, no, you're great. And then they'll reject you trying to incrementally improve, you know, by saying like, no, you should know that you're this beautiful person, or that you're this intelligent superstar or whatever. And it's like, well, no, if I were to, I mean, you know, like you said, my brain is going to reject that. Like, I have to kind of do it in steps.
Yeah.
I mean, we were having that conversation yesterday. You know, I texted you and I was like, look, I need you to hold me more accountable. Like, I know I've accomplished things. I know you've accomplished things. We recognize we're good, but we're not at the place where we need to be great, because greatness is, it may look great to society what we're doing as great things,
but we're not at our
peak. But at the level that I see, it's like, this is average. You know what I mean?
And people will think it's like negative, like you're thinking negative, or you don't value yourself. But it's like, no, I just know that this is not I'm not at the height of where I'm going.
Because when I look in the mirror, I love Kyle, you know, so it's not that. But the reality of it is that you have to have people around you that can hold you accountable to be greater than what you even believe that you're great at right now. And if they can see you in the future, but then hold you accountable, not just hold you accountable to become that, but walk with you through the process, and then maybe provide you with resource, or provide you with support, or provide you with steps, just like you came in here today. And I'm taking notes because this is amazing. So now I know if I have to check my soul, I'm calling Nichole, and it's like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And I trust that she's going to hold me accountable. It's like, Kyle, you need to get back on track. This is what you need to do. Well, what's the story? What's the story? Why do you feel that way? Where in your body do you feel that right now? All right, thanks, Nichole. I got it. Do you really? You know, so I think what you said is absolutely amazing. I have one question. I know you do as well. Who are you now, and who are you trying to become?
You know what's funny is we had a conversation a couple weeks ago. We met for coffee, and you asked me some questions, and I realized in that moment that I've changed a lot. I used to want this like fame and notoriety for myself, and I've really come to a place of fulfillment, joy. Being present is so much of a priority. I also want to heal and impact people's lives. And so for me, it's really coming into a place of finding, I hate the word balance, so I'm not going to use that, but finding intentional living as well as my impact, where I'm not losing sight of my kids and my relationship with my kids or any other aspect of my life, but just getting into a place where, and I truly believe that the universe supports you when you get into a place with yourself that's solid, that opportunities come in, that the right people come in, and that when you're in that space, it's just like you're a super attractor for the things meant for you, and you don't have to push as hard as you would if you're trying to prove something. So my goal is always to try to find the most alignment with who I really am, but still set the intention for my life that I positively impact everybody I meet, that they are able to get, you know, what they need from me, and that I'm responsible as a resource of my knowledge to share with as many people as I can.
I love that. What you got?
So my question is going a little bit different, but it reminded me of something you said. Yeah. So in situations, because you talked a lot about like identifying emotions and then being able to associate those with action eventually. So in a situation, say two people are in a conversation that's not really going well, because one person or more is not able to really identify what they're feeling or direct it in a way that's conducive to a good conversation. What would be your thought process? Because everybody communicates differently. So whereas some people are able to like really put their emotions, their feelings, their thoughts on the table, other people need more time to like think through, work through, and then come back. Do you have any suggestions about getting through conversations like that where the two styles are different, and so maybe one person hasn't had the opportunity to really identify their emotions yet to be able to put that action into the conversation?
It's really tricky. There is a very big scale of emotional intelligence of people who just have the ability to identify and know exactly what they're feeling at all times. And there's people who really have truly never had the time or the direction or the focus to redirect to feel within. I would say if the situation feels heated or there's a lot of emotion going on, walk away. It's really important to give people a break, and especially for people who need that slower processing time, it's good for them to go think about it and come back and articulate, because in the moment, some people just truly don't have the frame of reference to articulate what they need to say. There's also the element of asking yourself, am I surrounding myself with the right people? Do I need people around me who are also on a level of awareness and emotional intelligence that resonates with who I'm becoming and who I am? You guys were talking earlier about being around people who don't quite get what you're going through or get what you're experiencing or get what you're expressing. And that is really, really important, is to have people who are, I don't want to say on your level because I don't like, separating people in that way, but people who get you, know how to support you, and that it's not just a fight of trying to figure out what they need and what they want. Everybody is responsible for their own work. And so when you have somebody who isn't trying to learn how to articulate their feelings, and as an emotionally intelligent person, you're kind of trying to pull that out of them, you have to kind of step back and ask yourself, do I feel like this person is trying to or will be trying to articulate their emotions to me, and wants to grow and wants this connection to grow? Some people just get very lost in being a defensive person, being a blaming person, being a victim, oriented person. And so I think it really comes down to, can you teach somebody who's super separate from their emotions to be an emotional aware person? Absolutely, but they have to want to.
So you do think emotional intelligence can be nurtured or cultivated, I guess?
If the person desires to. I absolutely think that people have access to grow any part of themselves if they want to, and it's not being imposed on them. I think when people impose, I want you to speak your mind. I see this a lot in relationships, is people who are very emotionally intelligent, are very articulate with their emotions, want the other person to be that. And you also have to understand that not everybody thinks and functions like you. Not everybody experiences emotions in the same way. Not everybody. This took me a long time because I process my emotions so quick that I anticipate everybody does, and they're just not telling me. So I had to take a step back and be like, okay, this person isn't there. They have a pretty big separation with how they feel and how they're speaking about it. What do I need? And the only thing you can do in that situation is really address, here's what I need. Here's how I best experience conversations with you. And that's all you have. I mean, if you just really separate responsibility of, is this person wanting to grow? Is this person wanting to be better? I absolutely think that's possible. And then you can cultivate that experience of teaching them and modeling it for them of, I feel this when this occurs is different than you did this and pissed me off,
The I statements.
Yeah.
I like that. I think this conversation has definitely been one that I've learned from and that I'm impacted from, definitely. So I think about that person that's listening right now, that is probably taking notes, that is probably pulled over the car, that is probably taken out their phone and is texting somebody on even some of the different things that we've discussed today. But there's also that person right now that is struggling, that maybe doesn't still know what to do next, that person that has felt like they're giving up or like the world has given up on them. As you close us out, what are your words to that person?
My best advice is to remember who you are, remember your power, remember that there's people around you who love you and need you, and that you weren't put here by accident. Everything is temporary, and every little movement, if you can do one small thing for yourself a day, one small, I always recommend an Epsom salt bath. I think sometimes that just relaxes your body, relaxes your mind, and gives you a chance to start over. But even a meditation or a guided meditation. I love YouTube hypnosis. Jason Stevenson, I'll listen to that as I go to sleep. He has a good one on like confidence, anxiety reduction. There's so many things energetically that it's a whole different ball game that I think keep people stuck in really low emotions. But I will tell you, there's hope. There's people who want to help you, who are really good at helping people in your position. So you are not stuck. You are not lost. There is so much hope for you. There is a whole nother world on the other side of this. And I absolutely can speak from knowing exactly what that place feels like. But reach out to somebody, make a therapy appointment, get scheduled with somebody who supports you, lifts you up. And also we can pull energy from good people. So when we're around people who are like good energy, we can actually just feel a little bit better by being near them and being around them. So gravitate towards anything that feels good, even if it's a speaker or a podcast or a friend. go towards that. Go towards whatever light you can find. Even music will lift you up. So anything you can do to shift even just today and set that intention for tomorrow, to just shift a little something today to move into a better space. And I promise you'll get there.
I love it. I couldn't have said it any better. I couldn't have. This is Around the Way podcast, where we're here with Nichole Eaton, and we'll see you guys next episode.
Bye, guys.